Hey everybody, it's Leroy from Leroy Gaming, and in today's Baldurs Gate 3 guide, I'm going to take a look at the Fiend subclass for the Warlock. In this video, we're going to cover recommended stats at level 1, as well as I'm going to give you basic information about the class. We're going to do a full level 2 to 12 breakdown for the Fiend. We're going to show you all the spells available as you level. Later on, I'll give you some general equipment recommendations and my thoughts on multiclassing as well. You can use the timestamps below to jump to areas that most interest you. Without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at the Fiend subclass for the Warlock. Okay, at level 1, the important thing to note here is your primary ability is Charisma. Saving throw proficiencies are for Wisdom and Charisma. And you have a hit die that is 1d8. So more than a basic caster, but not quite as much as a martial class. You have proficiency with simple weapons and with light armor. You're going to get to pick 2 cantrip spells. These are the ones that are available. I'm going to mouse over the spells that you have access to and stop at ones that I find especially useful. And in the case of the cantrips, you're going to definitely want to use Eldritch Blast, which is the most important ability as far as spells or cantrips go for the Warlock class and is unique to them. And then my second option and recommendation would either be to have Friends, which is an interesting cantrip that can actually activate during conversations to give you advantage on rolls during conversations, or Mage Hand. Either one of those is excellent because Mage Hand is going to let you kind of interact with the world and do some things like push enemies, so it's pretty useful. Do note at level 1 you do unlock Warlock spell slots, which you don't get very many of them, but they do refresh when you do a short rest. The Fiend subclass, which you do get to pick at level 1, does get 2 unique spells that are pretty decent. And a subclass feature, Dark One's Blessing. When you reduce a hostile creature's hit point to 0 health, the gift from the patron gets you 4 temporary hit points. This does scale up as you level up. And here are the spells you get to pick from. At level 1, you get to choose 2 of them. So you have the 2 unique ones from the subclass, and then the following spells. And my top recommendation is picking Hex. What's nice about Hex is you cast this as a bonus action. You target a creature, you're going to do 1 to 6 extra necrotic damage against them. They will have disadvantage on an ability of your choosing, and you get to pick every time you initially cast it what that's going to be. And if the target dies before the spell ends, you can hex a new creature without expending a spell slot by using bonus action. This is a concentration spell, but it does seem to last until you long rest. So if you don't cast any other concentration spells, or you don't get hit hard enough to lose concentration, you can cast this an infinite amount of times. Now, an important thing to note when it comes to ability points is that baseline, again, you only have access to light armor. So if you're going to go with the basic light armor, this is the stat breakdown I recommend. 8 strength, 16 dexterity, 15 constitution, 8 intelligence, 10 wisdom, and 16 charisma. Now I put an asterisk to this because you may very well pick a race that gives you access to medium armor, or potentially you may multi-class and get heavy armor. If you end up getting medium or heavy armor, medium armor, you may want to drop your dexterity to 14 and either up your wisdom, for example. If you're going to wear heavy armor, then obviously you want to drop your dexterity to 0, and then you can max out charisma at 17, maybe get more constitution, and then more wisdom for wisdom saves. But this is a good setup if you're going to stick with light armor. Now level 2, you're going to gain another Warlock spell slot. You're going to also gain another spell from the list we saw earlier of your level 1 spells. But most importantly, you're going to get to pick 2 Eldritch invocations. The first one, and probably one that almost everybody gets, is Agonizing Blast. When you cast your Eldritch Blast cantrip, you add your Charisma modifier and the damage it deals, unless it is negative, which shouldn't be for Warlock. You can also choose Armor of the Shadow, as described here, which basically just lets you cast Mage Armor for free, which is good if you were to go for no armor build at all. Beast Speech. You can speak with animals at will without expending a spell slot. Beguiling Influence is going to give you proficiency in Deception and Persuasion. Devil Sight's a big one, and I highly recommend it. You can see normally not only in darkness, both in magical and non-magical form, to a distance of 24 meters. So yes, you can see through darkness the spell, and allows you to function normally within it. So this is huge. And of course, if your sub-race or race doesn't have the ability to see in the dark, that also helps with that. Fiendish Visage. You can cast False Life without expanding a spell slot. Mask of the Many Faces. You can cast Disguise Self at will without expending a spell slot. One with the Shadows teaches you how to cast one of the Shadows, which basically you vanish into the darkness and become invisible as long as you stand still. The problem is you can't do any actions, attacks, spells, or even move, so that makes this a little less useful. Repelling Blast. This is another passive that will buff your Eldritch Blast, and this one allows you to push creatures back up to 4.5 meters away from you when you hit them. And finally, Thief of the Fates. You can cast Bane using a Warlock spell slot. So the problem here is, notice this one makes you use a Warlock spell slot, which I do not recommend because you have so few of them as is. A lot of the other ones do not require you to do so. And you can always replace one of your spells with a new one, because as you level up, you're not going to get that many more spell slots, but you're just going to get new spells as you level up, and they will be upcast to the maximum level. So they're going to, even lower level spells, if they're damaging spells, they're going to get more and more powerful. Now at level 3, most of your Warlock spells will become stronger. You're going to gain another spell to your repertoire. And now you're going to get access to level 2 spells. Darkness is what I mentioned earlier, very, very powerful. You'll notice it says creatures cannot make range attacks into or out of it, but if you have Devil's Sight that you chose previously, you can fully function in darkness, so that's a really good one. Hold Person, also very solid. Mirror Image is good for defense. Misty Step is excellent for mobility. Scorching Ray is quite good damage-wise. And then the other ones are your previous level 1 spells. At level 3, you're also going to get to pick a Pact Boon. These are big game changers. The first one is Pact of the Chain. You're going to get to use a familiar. And in addition to your normal familiars that you can get at level 1, you can also get to choose between an Imp and a Quasit. Do note the Imp is pretty cool. It does have Devil's Sight, so if you want to do like a Darkness build, that's really, really good. And at level 5, if you choose Pact of the Chain, your Imp or your other familiars will get to attack twice around instead of one. Pact of the Blade is the most popular. You can summon a Pact weapon, or more commonly bind the one you're wielding, making it magical. But in addition, you're going to use your spellcaster ability modifier, in this case Charisma, instead of Strength or Dexterity. What it doesn't say here, it also will make you proficient in that weapon, pretty much. So you can equip just about any kind of weapon and make it your Pact weapon, and at that point it's just going to start using Charisma as the modifier for 2 hit and for damage. Do note you do have to recast this when you long rest. And then at level 5 you get an extra attack with your Pact weapon. Now apparently as of the current patch, it is bugged, and this stacks with any extra attacks. If let's say if you pick multi-class with a martial class like a fighter or paladin. So in theory, that can be an extra if you multi-class, 5 levels in a fighter, for example, and then get up to level 3 or level 5 in Warlock, then you actually would get 3 attacks around instead of 2. This may get fixed in the future. And then there's Pact of the Tome. Allows you to cast Guidance, Vicious Mockery, and Thorn Whip. Guidance is amazing. It basically, it will proc, you can choose it during conversations or any kind of checks. This is why a lot of people have clerics, etc. So this is a great cantrip to have. Vicious Mockery and Thorn Whip. And do note, at level 5, you will also gain access to casting Animate Dead, Call Lightning, and Haste, 1 time per long rest. At level 4, you're going to get another cantrip, get another spell, and the ability to replace the spell. And then you also get to choose your first feat. Now when it comes to feats, ability score improvements are going to be pretty tempting for this class, especially trying to get your charisma to level 20, because it's not only going to help you with checks for conversations, but it's also going to be good for your spell casting, and if you do Pact of the Blade, also for your melee combat. But I will say, if you are going to be starting with 15 constitutions I mentioned, you may want to increase your ability to not lose concentration on your spells, because spells like Hex, if you lose those and lose that spell slot, that can be kind of rough. And so what I recommend is you can pick up Resilience either at 4 or later on, and pick Constitution. This will give you +1 to Constitution, getting it to 16. But importantly, you're going to get proficiency of the ability saving throw modifier. And that's what gets tested when somebody hits you, whether you're going to keep that concentration or not. So that is one I highly recommend. You can, of course, if you're going to pick a big two-handed weapon, Great Weapon Master is never a bad option. But the most common way to go is to bump up your stats, your Constitution, get that to 20 as you level up. And again, I'm a big fan of Resilience. Warcaster is also really good if you really want to double down on your concentration. You're going to get an advantage on saving throws to maintain concentration on spells. And you can also use a reaction to use Shocking Grasp, but really the main thing here is that advantage. So if you were to get that and Resilience, not only would you get your proficiency, but you'd also get advantage, and it's very unlikely that enemies would break your concentration. At level 5, your packs deepen, and as I mentioned, at the level 1 section, you're either going to get an extra attack, your familiar is going to get an extra attack, or you're going to get access to 3 new spells, as noticed here, for Pact of the Tome. You're going to get another spell, and now you get access to level 3 spells. So here are those. Counter spell is quite potent. Fireball, obviously very famous spell. Very great AoE damage. Vampiric Touch is a decent damage/heal spell as well. And do note, it says here, for 10 turns you can use Vampiric Touch again without expending an additional spell slot afterwards. And then you do get to pick another Eldritch Invocation. And there are a couple new ones here. So Mire the Mind, you can cast slow with a Warlock spell slot. Again, downside is it does require a Warlock spell slot, and here's the information on that spell. And Sign of Ill Omen is another new one. It lets you cast Bestow Curse with a Warlock spell slot, and here's the information on that spell. At level 6, you get the access to Dark One's Own Luck. You call on your patron to change your fate and add a 1d10 to an ability check, and I believe this is once per long rest, but it may be short list. I actually haven't tested that too much, but it's nice. And you can, for example, just as you were to add anything else like Bardic Inspiration or anything like that, you can add it to one of your checks during conversations or any other time a dice roll is required where you actually pick the different additives. You also get to add another spell of your choice. and you have the opportunity to swap out a spell. At level 7, you're going to add another spell, and now you have access to 4th level spells, and here they are. Blight is very powerful. And you get to pick another Eldritch Invocation, and there's 3 more that become available. Book of Ancient Secrets. You gained a Ray of Sickness, Chromatic Orb, and Silent Spells. You can cast these spells once per long rest, and they don't expend any spell slots, so that's more powerful than some of the other options since you can multicast them. And then Dreaded Word, you can cast Confusion, but with a Warlock spell slot. So just like adding a spell that's normally not in your spell list. And then finally there's Sculptor of Flesh, you can cast Polymorph, but again with a Warlock spell slot. At level 8, you're going to be able to add another spell to your repertoire again. You're going to have a chance to replace spell, and you're going to pick another feat of your choice. At level 9, you're going to get another spell, and now you have access to 5th level spells. Cone of Cold is quite good. Flame Strike is also very powerful. And then you have Hold Monster. All 3 of them are extremely powerful. And then you get another Eldritch Invocation, and you get 3 more that get unlocked. Minions of Chaos, you can cast Conjure Elemental with a Warlock spell slot. Otherworldly Leap, you can cast Enhanced Sleep spell. And Whispers of the Grave, you can cast Speak of the Dead without spending a spell slot. Considering you can get an amulet in Act 1 very early on that's impossible to miss, that does this for free, this would be a horrible option to pick at level 9. But at level 10 you get another cantrip. You also get Fiendish Resilience. You choose a damage type and become resistant to it. You can pick a new damage type each time you shortlist. So you can only have one at any time active, but if you're like in a poison area, casting that, if you know there's going to be a lot of fire damage, swap it out as you need. And then you're going to get to pick another level 5 spell, so pick the one that best suits you. Now at level 11, you're going to get finally another Warlock spell slot. You're going to get another spell. You're going to be able to replace a spell, and you're also going to get Mystic Arcanum. So this is, you get one-time access to a level 6 spell, and very importantly it says once per long rest you can cast that spell without expending a spell slot. So you cannot cast this multiple times, but it also does not take away from your other spells. And here they are. They're all quite potent. Circle of Death, Arcane Gate, which functionally probably not as powerful here. Eye Bite, Flesh to Stone, and Create Dead, which is much more powerful version of Animate Dead. I'd probably say Create Dead or Circle of Death are probably the most potent. And finally, at level 12, you're gonna gain another spell of your choice. You're gonna gain access to one more Eldritch Invocation, and 12, you unlock one final option. It's called Life Drinker, and it's quite potent and interesting if you are going for a melee build. Your melee attacks deal additional necrotic damage equal to your charisma modifier, so this is quite good. You can replace the spell, and then you get to pick your final feat. Now as far as equipment recommendations go, it's going to depend on who plays your Warlock, and by that I mean if you play a humanoid like Will, he actually gets shield proficiency because of his human background, and so you will definitely want to probably equip a shield to get better defense. If you were to play Githyanki, they actually get access to medium armor, so you can get medium armor as well. And again, it's very popular to multi-classes, I'll mention in a second. So if you're multi-class of a martial class, you may want to go with heavy armor. So that's going to dictate what you choose. But let's say if you stay with the basic class and you don't get any extra armor proficiency from leveling up, then, or shield access, then I would probably recommend a nice two-handed sword, because again, you're going to be able to bind with your packed weapon if you're going to go with the melee version. Now, if you're not going to go packed to the blade, then it really doesn't matter what you equip weapon-wise at that point, because you're going to be using Eldritch Blast for your abilities, and then like you want to get anything that's going to increase charisma, like the birthright, for example, that I have, +2 to charisma up to 22, and then utility items like, for example, here's a necklace that's going to give you an additional level 2 spell slot. Now, when it comes to multiclassing, I feel like the Warlock is a class that gets multiclassed a ton. You can multiclass it with martial classes effectively, like the Paladin, for example, where you can go full charisma, ignore strength, and go the weapon pact, so that you can use charisma for not only all your spell casting, but also for your offensive abilities. So you're going to see lots of options, lots of builds that are going to utilize Warlock, and very commonly 3 levels of Warlock to get that packed weapon set up, maybe 4 to get the first feat, or go all the way to 5 so you get that improved packed weapon setup. And so either going again 3, 4, or 5 levels Warlock is going to be very, very popular. You're going to find lots of builds for it. For my main character, I use the Paladin Warlock, very, very powerful. So definitely lots of options for you for multiclassing. Alright guys, so that brings me to the end of the Fiend Warlock guide. I hope you found this subclass guide helpful. If you did, make sure to drop a like. If you have any questions or comments, do drop them below. And as always, thank you for all your support. If you want to see more from me, make sure to subscribe. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next video.